Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And I had to laugh at my own title for this week's episode because the unexpected key to transformation sounds like something that a marketing AI would write, like the, one strange trick to lose weight and, 3 unusual cures for prostate cancer. I don't know. But the reason that I call this the unexpected key to transformation is because when I realized it was the key to transformation, it was very unexpected. And I'll give you some context. I was chatting to one of the a sort of a client turned colleague in my community, and I've known them from a time when they were very much sort of you might describe them as a lost soul. Nothing terrible, nothing awful, but struggling to find their way in the world and make their way in the world, and someone who lived with a lot of fear and a lot of enemies. In a sort of found a way to do pretty well in a hostile world. And as I was talking with this person, it was so clear that none of that was relevant in their world anymore. Not that they never had a scary thought, not that everything in their life worked perfectly, but they really had become a thriving, contributory human. And it sort of fascinated me, because I've known other people for the same length of time that I've known this person, and many of those people, they've participated in as many conversations, they probably listened to as many podcasts, they've come on as many programs, and yet they're doing better, but they haven't really changed. And I was curious about that, just sort of seeing it, the contrast between somebody who genuinely had transformed and other people who were doing better. And look, most of us will take what we can get, right? When I for 30 years was searching through traditional personal development, spiritual development, psychological development programs, anything, if I could get one thing a little bit better, I thought that was great. But when I transformed, when I went from a high-functioning depressive to a really happy, sometimes messy, pretty successful guy, it wasn't a little bit better. My life really did feel completely different. And the impact that I started to have in the world really was completely different. And when I was looking for, what's the key? What's the difference that makes the difference? What became apparent, at least in the case of me and this person who'd so clearly transformed that I was speaking with, is we'd both come to see that fundamentally there was nothing wrong with us. After years of trying to clean up our acts and become better people and change in some meaningful way, we'd both gotten to a point in our own ways of seeing that we are as we are, and we're enough to function wonderfully in the world. Not that we can't still get better at things, not that there aren't messes that we'll make that we'll continue to have to clean up as we go, but just that fundamentally, we're not missing anything. Now, if that was different for us than it is for you, this would be very annoying to listen to. And you go, well, good for you. But in the meantime, I need to work on this and fix this and get better at that and stop doing that. But what became obvious in that same moment that it became apparent, yeah, my life works because I know that I'm enough, that there's nothing wrong with me. Even if there are still things I want to get better at and do differently. That's true of you without my having to know you. That's true of the person in your world you would most like to see change for the better. That's true of every human being on the planet. We're actually born with everything we need to succeed. Everything we need to thrive in the world. Everything we need to live full, happy, productive lives. Which does raise the question, then why don't we all come across that way? And why for so much of my life did it look like so much of a struggle? And why, in the case of this person that I was talking to who'd so clearly transformed, why weren't they experiencing that before we started talking and they started exploring the inside-out understanding? And the answer was, interestingly, kind of obvious. Because if I start with the premise that there's something wrong with me, that I'm not enough, my only choices are to struggle along kind of knowing it's not going to work out, give up and just not play the game of life, or work really, really hard to become enough, to fix what's broken and to improve what needs improving and to do renovations and updates and upgrades and hack my way to success. And that all of that interference interferes with the system. So there's a simple model in performance coaching that comes from Timothy Galway, who created the Inner Game series, the inner game of tennis, the inner game of golf, the inner game of sales, the inner game of ... And the formula, very simple. Performance equals potential minus interference. So in other words, unlike traditional coaching models which say, okay, what do you need? And we'll get you what you need and then you'll be more effective. The inner game of coaching points to the notion that we all have a potential for life, a potential for sport, a potential for performance. And the thing that gets in the way, and therefore the focus of coaching, is whatever interferes with it. And when it comes to human beings, what interferes with our enoughness, what interferes with our natural abilities, is us trying to figure out, improve, or work on those abilities, to work on who we are. Now understand, that's different from developing skills. If you want to get better at tennis, you probably want to play tennis. You want to get better at golf, play golf. You want to get better at sales, sell stuff. But you, the equipment, already works perfectly. And anything you do to try and make it better interferes with how amazing it already is. So, if you want to take this on as a little experiment, for the next week, just play with this as a working premise, as a notion, as a possibility. What if you already are enough? What if you're cooked, you're done, there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing left to work on about you? You can still develop skills, you can still make changes, but you're off limits. And just see how differently things unfold. And if you want to learn more about this and go deeper, I invite you to join me at a 9-month teacher training coming up called Sharing the Feeling. And you can learn more about it at michaelneill.org/sharing the feeling. And it's all about how to teach this inside-out understanding in the world. Until then, have fun, learn heaps, happy exploring, and I'll talk with you soon.